Hey everybody, we just got back from our first trip to Disney World since it's reopened, and we've gotten a ton of different questions about just about every aspect of that trip. So Sarah's going to kind of talk about what those questions were, the outline of what we're going to go through today, and then we're going to do our best to answer those questions here in today's video.
Yeah, so we're excited to kind of share our vlogs with you, but we figured since we can't get those all out quite yet, we'll go through these questions. And the general format of it is we're going to first talk about just our overall park experiences, so kind of what we observed when we were in the parks. Then we're going to go into more detail or questions about safety and masks and those type of questions. And then we'll end with kind of like our overall feelings towards it. I don't want to say recommendations because I think you should do whatever you want, but I guess our takeaways. And then we did have a few other like bonus questions about this trip specifically, so we'll save those for the very end as well.
Perfect.
All right. So first question was, what did we think about the crowds and what did we kind of observe? Was it busy? Was it not busy?
Yeah, I think the crowds were unbelievably low. It was very small. There were lots of open space. Crowds, the lowest crowds I think I've ever seen at Disney World.
I agree. Yeah, pretty much. So we went to Magic Kingdom and Animal Kingdom on this trip. We did not go to Hollywood or Epcot. But with those, both those two parks, it was very, very quiet. And then also the resorts we stayed at were not that busy either. So kind of going to that or related to that question, what were the wait times that we experienced?
Yeah, I'm trying to think what the longest one was, but I would say Splash Mountain was the longest wait time, and I think that was only because they had stopped to do some cleaning, and that was about 20 minutes. So overall, I would say wait times were unbelievably low at Magic Kingdom and at Animal Kingdom. I think, 10 minutes was probably the average we waited. A lot of rides were just walk-ons. A lot of rides you would not expect to be walk-ons were walk-ons. And overall, the lines looked long, I think. Actually, I know they looked quite long, but they weren't. It's just because there was so much spacing in between people in those lines. So, the actual wait times were very minimal.
I agree. Yeah, I think Flight of Passage, we walked straight onto it. So that was very minimal. We'll talk kind of about the line spacing when we get to the safety precautions. But yeah, crowds were very small. Wait times were very low. I'd say almost everything was 5 minutes throughout the day. And you would have the cleaning. Similarly, somebody asked how it was parking, because we did drive down here, and there was really no wait getting into parking either. So I feel like that was really easy.
We did go about 30 minutes after open for a few of those days. One day we did go right at open, and that was minimal. They're even doing spacing out in the parking lot, so they're parking every other row or every other parking spot, filling in a few rows, and they're going back and filling in those spots once the guests who have parked have actually entered the park. So they've kind of put a lot of thought into even the spacing in the parking lots, which I thought was a nice extra touch.
I agree. So one other thing was kind of like, we talked about the good things, I guess, the low crowds, the wait times. People also asked, like, what were the things that were missing or the things that aren't available right now? So do you want to...
So I guess what's not there, fast passes aren't there, parades are not there, though they do have some characters on mini floats type of things going throughout the day, but actual parades are not there. Shows are not there, so like the Lion King wasn't going on. Your night shows weren't going on, so Happily Ever After, Rivers of Light, those aren't happening. So there's a lot that's missing. There's no character meet and greets. There's no characters roaming around, or sometimes they have cast members out interacting with people. I did not see Kevin out. Did you?
No, I didn't see Kevin.
Yeah, so there's a lot missing.
Yeah.
A lot. It's very minimal what's being offered in terms of what you'd normally expect on a Disney vacation.
Yeah, I agree. And one person asked specifically about pin trading. I think they're going to try to do that, but for our trip, there wasn't any type of pin trading that I saw, at least.
I didn't notice any either.
Yeah, so, and then related to that, food availability. So quick service locations are open. The majority of them are mobile order only. I think there were a few exceptions. Like we went to Sleepy Hollow at one point.
Right.
That wasn't mobile order. That was kind of walk up and order. But a lot of the, so character dining is really not happening inside the parks. I believe Riviera does have theirs going, but that's very minimal. So the food, I would say, is a different experience as well. We chose to eat most of it outside, and some people asked, is it hard to eat outside in July in Florida? I mean, it's hot.
It wasn't that bad. I mean, we didn't eat anywhere that was in direct sun, so we ate at Satuli outside. Has a large canopy with fans and stuff, so you're in the shade. We ate outside at Nomad twice, so that wasn't bad. So, yeah, it's hot, but it's not unbearable if you are willing to, find a place that has some shade.
And we did go to like Nomad Lounge, similar shade situation.
I said Nomad.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
I apologize.
That's
But with that, people were asking like, are there waiters and stuff? So in Nomad Lounge, you do have a waiter.
Mm-hmm.
For the quick service locations, you just mobile order. There's still cast members who will direct you to quick service. So we went to like Pinocchio's Village house. And so for that one, they actually wouldn't let you into the quick service location unless you had a mobile order that was ready, and then they direct you in. So I actually kind of liked that because it kept the crowds much smaller inside, whereas I feel like normally people would go and kind of seek AC in those spots. So they were keeping it constrained to just those that had mobile orders. Or if you wanted a free cup of water, you could also ask the cast member. They would kind of lead you in and get you that free cup of water if you were looking for that.
Yeah, so like at Satuli, normally you get your own drinks. There's refillable fountains. They did have cast members there, so you would go up, you would tell them what drink you wanted. They would then get it for you, hand it to you. If you wanted a refill, you just go up, they get you a new cup, fill it up again, and that's how that worked. So guests weren't all touching the soda fountain. So they have put a lot of effort into, I think, how that dining situation works. For sit down, there's definitely a limited menu at all these places. So there is significantly smaller offerings than what you might be used to. So definitely check those out if you're going to a place with a specific item in mind. It may no longer be offered right now. I didn't notice any reduction too much in the quick service ones. Like Aloha Isle did have some reductions, but in terms of Satuli, I think
It was
they
normal.
have everything.
It seemed pretty normal, yeah.
So yeah, just check out the menus wherever you're looking to go first because they are reduced.
And one last thing about the experience with getting the food, I would say that like Universal, for example, when we went there, the lines for that were huge. There are some places that looked busy. Like I think one time we walked by Pecos Bill that had a decent line getting inside, but a lot of the stuff still, you could get food if you wanted to. So I would say the quick service, you may have to wait a little bit, but it was pretty readily available for when we were looking for it.
It was very easy to get. Just be sure if you're there at the end of the night, you order, I think it's about 30 minutes or so before, because they do have pickup windows, and once they're filled, you just can't order anymore because they are closing, at 7 o'clock, for instance, the park closes. You need to order by around 6:30 or else you just won't be able to do that mobile order, whereas normally you could have just walked into a quick service, a minute before the park closed, and you can still get your food. That's not the case now.
Yeah. All right, so I think that kind of segues into the safety question. So we've hit on a little bit. The biggest safety question, or I guess new change with the new precautions, is the masks. So everyone wants to know kind of everything about the mask. So I guess the first thing would be what type of mask do we use and why?
We just use I think it's called 3-ply disposable medical masks. They're not the surgical masks, the N95s, anything like that. They're just the blue ones. We wear those because they fit our faces well. They're cool. They're somewhat breathable. It's Florida and it's in the summer, so we take that into consideration. But I've seen people with all different kinds of masks, from Disney-themed ones to, athletic ones like Under Armour. You do see people walking around with full N95 masks on, everything like that. The only thing you don't see anymore in Disney is no gaiters and no bandanas. It does have to have an ear loop, and those two things I just mentioned are explicitly listed as not allowed. So they do say you need an ear loop, and we've seen them actually enforce this before people even get into the park, telling them, what you're wearing is not going to work. You're going to need to find a better mask, and they are enforcing that outside of the park, at least from what we saw.
Yeah, and they did have the Disney mask that you can purchase.
Yep.
But yeah, we did specifically see a couple get stopped because they had the bandana style. And then they had other masks with them, so they switched. For our masks also, somebody asked how many do we go through a day. We really only used one. I would say like if you're going to do water rides or if you just would rather have it switch out, you might go through more, but we would typically just use one a day, but we would bring others with us as extras just in case like it got ripped or wet or something happened to it. So we would bring extras with us, but typically we just had one a day.
Yeah, I agree. They do get a little bit warm, but they're not that bad, so you can definitely get through with one a day. We went on Splash Mountain. I do think I got pretty wet on that, and I did, I believe, change after that. But I think other than that one time, I only used one mask each day.
Yeah. So those are what work for us, but I think the best thing is kind of do what is comfortable for you and try it out ahead of time if you can.
Yes. Definitely try it ahead of time. Get a couple different mask styles, wear them at home, see which one's most comfortable on you, because that's really, I think, the most important thing is that you're comfortable in it.
Yeah. And we did see like friends there, and we all had different types. So I think we had everything from Under Armour, some friends had, to the cloth one. So you got to do kind of with what's right for you. A lot of people are asking, can you take the mask off? And when can you take the mask off in Disney World?
Yeah, so the answer is no, you can't take it off unless you are eating, drinking, or in a relaxation zone. You cannot take it off for pictures. You cannot take it off on a ride. You just can't take it off. And this is the only thing that annoyed me about Disney, and seeing these people who just thought that the rules don't apply to them. Like, Disney is a privilege. It's not something you have to go do. So I just go into it knowing I have to wear a mask. This is something that I am agreeing to do to go into Disney, and you won't be disappointed if you just go into it saying, I have to wear a mask at all times unless I'm sitting down and eating or if I'm in a relaxation zone.
Yeah. And I would say that, like Animal Kingdom on our last day, I'd say 98% of people were respecting it, and it was no problem. And for the Magic Kingdom, like in front of the castle, a lot of people were taking off masks. One day we were there for pictures, and that the big difference, I guess. So we've been to Universal before, so comparing it to that is the only other real basis I have. Universal, I felt like the workers there were more frequently telling people to put it up. Whereas Disney, we did see them ask people a couple of times, but there weren't cast members specifically walking around telling people to put their masks up as much as I expected them to.
Yeah, especially considering they made this entire team of people who are wearing these yellow shirts and have these special face masks that stick out, that their job was to enforce this rule among guests. There's not many of them. So I will say it's more of a situation where people, the 99% of people who are following it on their own. It's not as much Disney telling them that they need to be following it, which I actually enjoyed seeing so many people just agreeing to follow this rule. But yeah, there are some places where people just feel like that the rules don't apply to them and they're taking their masks off. And I would like to see Disney maybe police those areas a little bit more, or just remind guests, hey, you're in the theme park. You don't just get to take off your mask when you want, when it's convenient for you. But like Sarah said, 99% of people were wearing it and wearing it the right way.
Yeah, I think overall there was a lot more people wearing them appropriately in Disney than Universal. But
oh yeah, definitely. It was outstanding. It exceeded my expectations. The mask wearing and the safety precautions in general.
Yes, they did a really good job. Again, there are these relaxation zones, so those are areas specifically where you can take them off that Jeff mentioned. Another place where you do not need masks, and we'll talk more about the resorts later on, but in the pool, so if you're swimming in a pool area, you do not need to wear the mask, and then it's just kind of guests respecting each other with their kind of space and not getting too close to people. But in the pool area, they are not required. But like Everest, you still wear it. So all of the rides, you're going to still be wearing them, even on the roller coasters.
Yeah, and it's absolutely fine to wear them on the rides. I mean, you wear them on a roller coaster, they don't fall off. You wear them on Splash Mountain, you get wet, that's fine. You might want to change it or let it just dry for a minute, but it doesn't fall off. So it's not really an issue. You honestly, I think, forget you even have a mask on when you're on the rides. It's more noticeable when you're off the rides and you're just walking around thinking, not entertained as much. But when you're on the rides, you don't even, at least for me, I didn't even realize I had one on most of the time because I'm just my attention is just put elsewhere, which is kind of a nice thing.
Yeah. And so kind of going off that, so for the rides, how did we feel about like the safety measures on the rides in general?
In general, they were fine. They were pretty good, actually. I mean, they skip line or rows a lot of times. They have huge spacing in the queues. Certain rides have dividers in the queue, plexiglass type of things to separate if there's little switchbacks where you'd normally be right next to another row of guests. I think they did an outstanding job. There's minimal number of people on almost every ride in terms of what a ride vehicle could normally handle.
Yes, and they did, so we mentioned this earlier, I think Jeff mentioned it earlier, that they do stop to clean the rides, and so I believe it's every 2 hours, a cast member told me, that they're going to pause the rides, and then they basically have everyone come off the ride and clean all the ride vehicles. So we actually saw it for the Little Mermaid, and they were like spraying the ride vehicles, and then they let it go through once to, I think, dry them, or maybe more than once, I'm not sure how much. But they are sanitizing them. It's not in between every guest. So it's not we ride and then you would come on and it'd be clean between us. But they are doing like mass cleanings of them all throughout the day as well.
Right. And so Sarah said they have all the guests come off. That doesn't mean they're taking guests off the ride. They wait and stop loading people until all the guests have come off the ride. And yeah, they are cleaning every single vehicle at that point, running them through to make sure every vehicle has been cleaned. And then they're restarting the line. So that's kind of what I was talking about for the Splash Mountain, what that wait was for. We just happened to be in line when they went through this cleaning process. So they had to empty the entire ride, clean every single ride vehicle before they allowed people to come back on. So yes, we were in line, I think I said 20, maybe 25 minutes, but 15 of that we weren't moving at all because of this cleaning process. Other than that, it was like a 10-minute wait.
Yeah, I completely agree. And similar for the ride experience, there is hand sanitizer. So a lot of people ask, like, how is hand sanitizer? There's way more hand sanitizer throughout the park in Disney World, in my opinion, machines, than there were in Universal. However, with the rides, there are machines for hand sanitizer before you get on the ride. There are machines for hand sanitizer when you go off the ride, but it's optional. So at Disney World, again, the guests, I feel like overall were using these things and all of that, but at Universal, it's forced. And so they would literally have a worker there standing, spraying hand sanitizer, and you could not get on the ride unless you used the hand sanitizer. That's not the case at Disney.
Yeah, this is one of the few criticisms I had. It would be nice if it was required because you get on a ride and you're touching stuff. Every guest is putting their hands on something. It's almost impossible to go on a ride and not touch anything. So just that extra that Universal was doing in terms of making sure every guest's hands were sanitized before getting on just added a little bit of extra, I guess, peace of mind. Whereas at Disney, yes, most people were using it, but the fact that it's not required, you always just wonder, well, what was the guest in front of me on this ride doing? Were their hands clean? Do they care as much about sanitation as some of the other guests? So it's just a little bit of a uncertainty, whereas at Universal, they had their hands sanitized before they got on, but it was a minor thing. Most guests were using the available sanitizer that was there.
Yeah. And then the last ride question we had was, were there any rides we didn't feel safe on? And then a lot of these questions also came from Instagram where people saw we were not happy on the safari experience, and they asked kind of why did we get off the safari and not ride it? So do you want to talk about?
Sure. So the safari is the only ride I think that I really don't think Disney did a good job on. Yes, they did put up some plexiglass type of things. Not plexiglass because it's soft, I guess vinyl, or I'm not sure exactly what. But they put up some dividers between each of the rows. The dividers do not go all the way to the bottom, to the sides, or to the top, but they are pretty large. But the problem I had is they're still loading every single row, which means you're still only about probably 8 to 12 inches from the person in front of you, your head to the back of theirs, and masks are optional. So now you have everybody filling in rows, getting very close to each other, and taking their masks off, which I really just did not appreciate. Every single other ride is so spread out. They're doing so much social distancing on every other rides that are far more popular than the safari, that I just couldn't figure out why they decided not to do it on the safari. And then to make masks optional on top of that, it just didn't seem like a well thought out plan. So we just got off the ride once they filled in every row and people started taking their masks off. Before we even left the station, we just said we didn't feel comfortable on it. We got off. It's a ride we've done a bunch of times. But I can see how if you don't do it a lot, or this is a one-time vacation, that could really ruin a trip for someone.
Yeah, so I agree with everything Jeff said. I think for me the biggest factors were that it wasn't busy. So we literally walked right on, and then he directed us to the back of the safari vehicle, which was perfect because we actually asked. We asked for the back because there was somebody in the first and second row, and there was nobody around us. So we assumed, perfect, the safari vehicle will leave. Even though there's, not ton of space. If it is full, they'll have like they're in the front row, we're in the back row, and we're pretty spread out, even if people choose to take their masks off. So that's where we were happy and got on the ride. But then we waited there not very long, so we waited a couple minutes.
It was
but
probably 5 minutes. I mean, 5 solid minutes we waited there.
Yeah, and they proceeded to fill in all of the other rows. So we had, before we got on, asked the cast member if masks were optional. It was opening day, so we had seen during the cast previews that people were saying masks were optional. We asked the cast member out front. He said, yes, they're optional once you're away from the gate. So basically, you're loading on, masks are on, but once you pull away, you can take them off. And then when you pull back up, you had to put them back on. So we knew kind of that aspect getting onto the ride. But for me, the part where I was like, no, we need to get off was when they proceeded to fill in every row. After the fact, so the next couple of days, people would continue to say they're requiring masks now. So masks are now required. But then the next day, we heard people saying like, no, they're optional again. So I feel like they haven't, at least in my opinion, gotten a solid policy. So I would like them to just make masks required or do the first row, last row. A lot of rides, they do first row, last row. So for me, that would make it feel much better. We didn't do things like Buzz Lightyear, spin, the Magic Kingdom shoot one, because we didn't want to touch the guns. But for the most part, all the rides, I agree. I felt perfectly safe on. The Safari was the only one we really had a problem with.
Yeah, and if that doesn't bother you, by all means go on it. Most people are. It was just our personal choice not to. So you just kind of have to make that decision. But overall, rides are, in my opinion, incredibly safe, almost on the side of too cautious, which I appreciate, especially in these early days of figuring out how the park's going to operate. But Disney, I think, has gone above and beyond on average in terms of making sure people feel comfortable in their parks, on their rides, and in any other aspect of what they're doing in the park that day.
Yeah, I completely agree. Related to that, so we had a lot of questions of the bathrooms because you can't really film in the bathrooms, and what was that experience like? I'll let you talk about the men's room, and I'll
Sure. So I can kind of just say two things. The men's room, I don't know if there's any social distancing or anything because I literally was the only person in a men's room anytime I went. Their park levels are that low. I will say in Universal, the most unsafe place I went was a restroom. I swear everybody who walked in there immediately just took off their mask and used it as a place to hang out mask-free. But in Disney, there was just so many bathrooms. Everybody's so spread out in the parks, and I never encountered another person anytime I ever went into one. So I felt completely safe in all the restrooms.
Yeah, and so for the women's room, I guess two things. So one is when you're walking into the restroom, there's typically a door that will stop. The first door you push to get into the restroom before you actually get to like the stalls and stuff, that is propped open. So that I really appreciated that you didn't have to touch it with people coming in and out. So even though it's kind of like letting out the air conditioning, I was really happy that I didn't have to touch that door initially.
Same with the men's room. That was open in the men's room as well. The main door, yeah.
Yeah, and then I don't recall seeing any markers on the floor in the women's room. So it's similar experience. I think I maybe only had one person at one time in the restroom with me. But I purposely picked the larger ones, and it was just kind of pick whatever stall you want. I don't believe any stalls were locked, so it wasn't like every other, and the sinks just had a reminder, like, please wash your hands for at least 20 seconds. But besides that, it really wasn't, I didn't see many, like, additional stuff taking place there, and it might just be because Disney knows crowds are just so low, it's not needed. And I think if that is their assumption, it is true, at least for right now, because there was hardly anyone in any of the bathrooms.
Yeah, the only other thing I'll add is those restrooms that still have crank paper towel machines, or like the manual ones, they still have the manual ones. So I didn't really want to touch those. So if I went into a restroom that you had to actually pull on the lever to get the paper towels out, I just let my hands air dry outside. Those that have the automatic paper towel dispensers still do, so those were fine. But they did not go in and make, hands-free paper towels available in every restroom, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah. And then the last safety thing was, how did we feel about the safety at the hotels?
Yeah, I have nothing to say about the hotels negative. There were auto check-ins, so you do it online, and they automatically are texting you when your room is ready, or push notification, whatever it is. So we did not interact with, I think, a single cast member in any of the hotels we stayed at. We just went straight to our rooms. You scan your Magic Band or your phone, whatever you want to use, you go in, and they have extensive cleaning policies with a little paper diagram for you, shows you what they're doing specifically to enhance the cleaning, and shows you on the diagram where that's taking place in the room. Yeah, I mean, they were fine. No issues at all. We stayed at 4 different hotels, I think, on this trip, and all of them were equally good. 3 Disney ones and the 4 Seasons. And in terms of the cleanliness, I thought they were all fine. The only thing I thought Disney was going to do, and I don't really mind that they didn't, but I thought that I had read somewhere that they were going to do temperature checks before you went, like to allow you into the hotel, similar to how they do at the resorts, but they are not doing that. And I didn't mind that they weren't doing it. I just had thought that they had read somewhere that they were going to do it.
Yeah, I agree. So, like at Universal, when we went to the hotels there, you would get your temperature check, you'd have a wristband, and you were set basically for the day. The Four Seasons had the temperature checks as well, but the Disney hotels did not. I think it would be hard to maybe do that because of the resorts and the ways you can enter the building, and so to police it, I think would be very difficult. If they could do it, it'd be awesome, but I just think it's not realistic for them to kind of incorporate at the resorts. For me, I agree with Jeff. I thought the rooms were very well cleaned. They had like the remotes in little plastic bags saying those were cleaned. If you got to a room that had the reusable showers, so like the big shower shampoo and stuff that are filled by them, not the little travel size ones, they'd have a little thing over it saying it was cleaned. The thing for me that was most problematic at the resorts were the elevators. So with the elevators, I believe it was 1 party or 4 individuals in the elevators. We were lucky, and a lot of times we were on floors that we didn't need to take the elevator, so that was just pure luck that 2 of them worked out that way. I personally just wish it was like 1 party, regardless if it's 1 person or 4 people or 10 people, whatever your party is. That's just a personal thing, but that's not the case currently.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really mind even if it's just 2 people in an elevator as much. 4 individuals in 1 elevator, I mean, they're not big elevators. That was kind of a weird thing, I thought, but I don't know, especially given how quiet the resorts are. They honestly could have said 1 person per elevator, and I think at most you might have waited 2 minutes for an elevator. I mean, we literally saw almost no other guests, no cast. We saw cast members, you just don't interact with them, but they are there if you need them. And it's just so quiet at the resorts right now that I think you don't really run into anybody or have any issues like that either.
Yeah, and there are food options available at the resorts. Those I think are also good. But yeah, so I think overall the safety at the hotels was also very well done. All right, getting more to like our personal preferences. So one major question that we got was, do we still feel the magic? So do we still think Disney magic is there if you were to take a vacation? Like, do you think it's still there?
I don't. I don't think so. I mean, now what it is to me is these awesome icons. So the castle, the Tree of Life, things like that, the Epcot Spaceship Earth Ball, and rides. That's really what Disney is right now, for better or worse. It's nice that they're open, but no, it's not the same at all. It has nothing that I know people have asked, like, do the lower crowds make it less magical? Absolutely not. It has nothing to do with the crowds. The crowds are awesome. It's just the fact that there's no shows, there's no parades, there's no character interactions. Yes, and there's some characters out, but it's just not the same. You go there and everybody's a little bit on edge, just everybody's a little bit extra careful, and you're always just in the back of your mind thinking, am I too close to the person in front of me? Are they too close to me? Should I touch this? Should I not touch that? Do I feel comfortable going on this ride or going into this restaurant? Even if it's not, a thing that you're always thinking of, it's just that little bit of extra there that I honestly don't think it's the same.
So I will agree with you on some of it and disagree with you on others. So for me, is the magic still there? I said yes. So for me, the magic is still there in the sense that we had some amazing interactions with cast members. So for example, when we were in Animal Kingdom one morning, there was this guy named Jared, and Jared was sharing all this information with us about the lemurs. And that was just because there aren't many people, he could sit there and talk with us, and no one else was coming up. And when we walked into the park, they're like, hey, how is it? Oh, great, sure, and great, I love this. And so because there's so few guests, you're getting a lot of really personalized attention, which I really appreciated. I actually enjoy the floats with the characters coming through, so we typically won't stand out for a parade very often. So I liked that they came through. We don't usually do character meet and greets. So I thought that was like a really good way of kind of getting Mickey out there and still seeing his face, but not encouraging people to like stand all together in a spot for hours. And for me, I'd say like a lot of people are like, did you cry when you see the castle? So that's just, I guess, not us as much. But for me, I really got excited and like forgot for a second about all this stuff when we were at Animal Kingdom and they had the birds flying in the morning and the music was playing. And so for me, that brought a lot of the magic. I will say the rides are still great. They're still there. So is the magic there? Like, yes, I still think the magic is there, but it's very different. So I agree a lot with what Jeff was saying at the end. Even when I was enjoying and watching the characters, like you're always thinking like, is somebody standing close to me? Do they have their mask on? Did I sanitize recently? Like when you're on ride, like, am I safe? And then you get back to the park after the thing and be like, okay, did I do everything right? So I think you're still able to enjoy it. If you're not worried at all about the virus stuff, then you'll be totally fine. And I think you'll be okay. But for us personally, we just, we're very conscious of kind of making sure we're being as safe as we could be. And so I do think like that is just part of life right now. And if you go to the parks right now, and that's just something to factor in. If it was somebody's first time going to Disney World, would you tell them to go in right now was another question.
No, I would absolutely not go right now. To be honest, I mean, I don't have kids, but I can imagine that kids aren't going to have a fun time right now. There's just so little to do in between the rides right now that's where I think for me the biggest part of the magic is missing. So when we used to go to Disney, it was some rides, but then a lot of walking around and checking out shops and interacting with different things like that that they're just not available anymore. And so I think that if you literally go to Disney just for the rides, you're going to have a great time. If you go to Disney for the rides and everything else that Disney has to offer, I am afraid you might be disappointed with a current trip.
Yeah, I think if this is your first ever Disney trip, I would say try to hold off if you can until at least they start up like the shows and the fireworks. So if there's a way where they can bring some of those back, I think that will help a lot. I still think like it's a fun vacation. I think it's like a photographer's dream to go and take pictures. I will say also one thing Jeff mentioned is the kids aspect. We really didn't see that many kids. So
No.
it was a lot of adults, maybe some teenagers, but the kids that were there were wearing the masks and following the rules. They have to, I think 2 and older
Yeah,
have to
I
wear.
think it's all the way down to 2 years old or up, you have to wear a mask. So essentially everybody who's not an infant.
Yeah. So I think that's probably part of it. Our friends have kids and they're holding off because their little one really doesn't want to wear the mask.
Yeah.
And so I think that definitely is a factor as well. But yeah, if it's your first time to Disney, I would say like if it's a once in a lifetime trip, I would probably, if you can, it stinks to postpone, but I would probably recommend postponing. If you go to Disney somewhat frequently, then I'd say like if you want to go for low crowds and rides, go for it.
Absolutely.
All right, will we be back soon?
Yeah, I think right now our next scheduled trip is in just 2 weeks. So we did not get to Hollywood yet. We did not get to Epcot yet. So we did have to come home a couple days early, so we had to cut that out. So we are going back in 2 weeks as it's currently scheduled. You know, things can always change, but right now we'll be back very soon.
Yeah. So yeah, for us, again, we have annual passes. We tend to go down pretty frequently. So for us, it's easy to kind of go down. And so yeah, we're gonna go back assuming we feel comfortable. So that's gonna be the big thing was we'll keep an eye on everything, make sure we feel comfortable, but we are hoping to go back down and stay for a little bit of a longer trip down there.
Yep.
All right, anything else on like our just feelings on it?
No, I mean, if it's your first trip, you know, you might want to hold off, like Sarah said. But if you are a Disney regular or you're okay with some of the things that are missing from the parks now, and that doesn't really bother you, then I think you can still have a great time going on rides, eating at some of the restaurants, and kind of just walking around the parks, which is very easy to do now. Easier than it's ever been before, just because, you know, you don't see many people if you're just wandering around.
Yeah. And I will say these are completely our opinions, so you should do whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
We did what we were comfortable with, which is why we didn't do certain things like the safari. So you just have to like trust what's best for kind of you and your family. All right, we did have a couple other questions that weren't about the new safety measures, so we'll just add them here at the end. So we got a ton of questions about why we changed resorts so many times. on this trip?
Yeah, it was just something fun to do. I think that we were unsure. So this trip was booked a long time ago, and I think we were unsure when the parks were exactly going to open. So we were planning on going down either way, and it was just going to kind of be, that was going to be our entertainment, is just checking out all these different resorts. And the parks happened to open almost exactly when we were going to be down there. I think we canceled one day in the beginning because we were supposed to be down there, I think, a day before they opened or something. So that's what it was. We just didn't change anything. We kept them as they were. We've been to a lot of these resorts before, but we hadn't done the Four Seasons, so that was new. And it was just a fun way to kind of get around and check out some different resorts, especially since the parks were closing at, I think Animal Kingdom was 6 p.m. and Magic Kingdom was 7, so you had the evenings free, and it was nice to just explore those places. So no real reason other than something to do.
Yeah, we just enjoy resort hopping, kind of experiencing the different resorts. We packed pretty light, so the repacking wasn't that big of an issue for us, and we did have the cars, which I think made it easier as well. And we are not DVC members, so a lot of people asked, are we DVC? What happened actually with our reservations is so similar to what Jeff said. We had booked these a long time ago, so before they closed the parks, before all of that, we had actually booked, so like for example, we had booked Port Orleans Riverside for one of the nights. And that resort currently isn't open. So we had called Disney and they moved us to a different hotel. That was actually that night we got moved to the Kidani Village 1-bedroom suite. So like we didn't book that. It was a huge upgrade. And they did that at no cost. If you didn't want to take the option they offered you, you could pay the difference to go to a different resort as well. So a lot of the resorts we ended up in were actually ones we had originally booked to.
Right.
But we are not DVC members. It's just the DVC resorts were the ones that were open right now. And so that's what kind of Disney put us in for the ones that weren't open.
Yeah, so it just worked out. We had booked every night at a different hotel. It just happened to be different hotels than the ones we ended up at. But when we called, depending on where you were booked at, Disney had allocated a specific alternate resort. So like Sarah said, when we were booked at Riverside, we called up because Riverside wasn't opening, and they said, okay, you're at Riverside this night. The alternate resort that you can go to for free is Kidani Village. We did not have a choice. It was, this is where you're going, or you can go to Pop Century, which was open, which was lesser, and they would have refunded us, or you can pay the difference and go to any of the other deluxe resorts that were open, but they would not cover that change. So that's just kind of how it worked out, is we just got put at the different resorts based on where our original reservation was.
Yeah. Yeah, so for us, it worked out really well.
Yeah,
it was kind of fun experiencing all the different resorts.
Yep.
But yeah, so that was our main other questions. Lots of people asking about that. The last question that somebody asked about was, or I guess a lot of people asked about, we had a PhotoPass picture, which is where it like zooms into you at Magic Kingdom. So a lot of people asked, how did we get that? That is just going to be a regular PhotoPass option. So if you see a cast member standing in the hub grass in front of the plaza, they have a camera on top of a building that will like zoom in on you, take the picture and zoom out. And for us, we wanted to do it on this trip. Actually, I think our friend Tina might have brought it up. And so thank you, Tina, for that one. But for us, we did that. And it was great because you could kind of see the park, that it was so empty, and the castle with the new paint job. So that was another question we got a lot of questions about that aspect as well.
Yeah, so if you're looking for this one, don't look for a cast member with a camera. It's going to be a PhotoPass cast member, but they have an iPad because the camera's mounted on top of the plaza building. So if you see a cast member over in the hub grass to the right as you're going down Main Street without a camera and it looks like an iPad, that's probably the spot to go.
Yeah. And related to that, there are lots of PhotoPass cast members out. So there was plenty of them around. No lines really for them. So if you do have that memory maker, then you can use that all you want. They're all out and about. So I think that's all of the questions that we had. Well, I think I hit on the topics of all the questions we had. But if there is a question that I missed, or that we missed talking about, please just leave it in a comment below and we will go through and kind of answer those as well. We're looking forward to hopefully getting back to the parks in a few weeks. So we'll be back down there, and then in the meantime, we'll get to share our vlog soon.
Yeah, so the first vlog will be out this Sunday.
Yeah.
Definitely check it out.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.